Hello, everyone, and welcome. Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. We're delighted that you're here for this Sacred Languages Symposium. I'm the Reverend Dr. David Grafton, Professor of Islamic Studies and Christian-Muslim Relations here at Hartford International University for Religion and Peace. And I am the current director of the Duncan Black MacDonald Center for the Study of Islam and Christian-Muslim Relations. Welcome to this webinar, our third Sacred Languages Symposium, which is a symposium that invites select scholars and practitioners in the field of scriptural studies of the Hebrew Bible, New Testament, Qur'an, or other sacred texts to examine and explore various facets of how our sacred languages are understood, used, and interpreted in various cultural and historic contexts. And this year, this third symposium, we have focused on the theme of human dignity as it has been understood and conveyed from sacred texts into various religious and cultural traditions. So we're delighted that you are here with us. It should be a very interesting and fun event. And I would now like to introduce my colleague who will be the moderator, Professor Lucinda Mosher, Professor of Interreligious Studies, the Director of the MA program in Interreligious Studies, and a fellow colleague of mine in the Duncan Black MacDonald Center here. And I should note, the new president of the Association of Interreligious and Interfaith Studies. We're so proud of you. Welcome.
Thank you. It is my pleasure to be here tonight at this really interesting symposium that's about to unfold. And it's my special pleasure to introduce our speakers to you. So you will be hearing from Imam Arqum Rashid, who holds various ijazat, those are Islamic licenses in specific subjects, a degree in Islamic law from Al-Azhar University in Egypt, a J.D., a law degree from Delaware Law School, and a master's in interreligious studies from Hartford International University, where he's now pursuing his Ph.D. Hence, it will come as no surprise that he is both the resident scholar and imam at the Islamic Society of Central Delaware and will soon be a special assistant U.S. attorney in Maryland, with prior experience as a deputy attorney general in Delaware and assistant state's attorney in Maryland. Imam Rashid is much sought after as a preacher and public speaker. His current research focuses on human dignity in Islamic thought and law. Then you'll hear from the Reverend Dr. Ed Duffy, who holds degrees from Princeton and Columbia Universities and a PhD from the Graduate Theological Foundation. He has taught New Testament Greek here at HIU since 2003. He also teaches New Testament Greek at Sacred Heart University. And he sometimes teaches courses in early Christian studies. He's a retired UCC, United Church of Christ pastor, and still does some supply work for various congregations. His publications include the co-authored volume, The Infographic Guide to the Bible, the Old Testament, a visual reference to everything you need to know. Our third speaker will be Diki Sofjan, who holds degrees from Pajajaran University in Indonesia and Northeastern University in Boston, Massachusetts, and a PhD from the National University of Singapore. He is an associate professor and partnership and networking coordinator at the Indonesian Consortium for Religious Studies. He is also vice president of Globe Ethics in Geneva, Switzerland, an organization that strives to equip individuals and institutions for ethical thinking, decision-making, and action through higher education and policy engagement from cross-cultural and global perspectives. Finally, we'll hear from Anthon Jason, who holds a bachelor's degree in psychology from Sanata Dharma University in Indonesia and a diploma from the Maitreya Missionary Institute, plus a master's degree from Gajah Mada University Center for Religious and Cross-Cultural Studies, where he's now a PhD candidate. His research interests center on the intricate connections between religion and ecology, ecological justice, and interreligious dialogue as he strives to improve understanding between different religious and cultural perspectives while addressing critical environmental and social challenges. I am sure you will agree with me that this is going to be a most interesting and rich conversation with four people so diversely equipped to lead us in thinking about human dignity. So I think we turn it now to our first speaker, Arqum Rashid.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I hope you guys can hear me. Gonna go ahead and share my screen very quickly. Okay, can someone confirm from the organizers if they could see my screen?
Yep, you're good.
All right, perfect, thank you. Once again, good evening, everyone. So I have about 15 minutes to give you an overview of inherent human dignity in the Quran and Islamic law. I'm going to do the best I can in those 15 minutes. So let's go ahead and get started. The very first thing that I want to kind of touch on is what is human dignity? And the reason that I bring this up first is that the concept of dignity is spoken about so often, but many times we don't really identify what we're talking about. And it's difficult to define. So what we're going to do is look at four things that are usually found in this concept of inherent human dignity. The first is that it is a worth or value. The second is that it's universal, meaning it's across the board, every single human being. The third is that it's inherent. It's not granted by governments, but this is something that's inherent in human beings. And the fourth is that it's equal in all human beings. So this kind of takes out other usages of dignity, such as somebody who is dignified because they hold a specific position or a specific office or whatever it may be. This is a type of dignity that is found in every single human being. It also removes other forms of cultural dignity that can be found because of certain reasons. So, for instance, in certain religious tradition, a person might be more dignified because they are a religious person, quote unquote. But that's not the type of dignity that we're talking about today. What we're going to be talking about and doing an overview of is the type of human dignity that is present in every human being and in an equal amount in every human being. And these 4 points, I didn't make them up myself or come up with them myself. They're taken from Professor Aaron Daly, the author of Dignity Rights, and a professor at law at Delaware Law School. So for those who want further research, they can find her book and kind of gather that information there. So in the Islamic tradition, dignity comes from the Qur'an itself. In some other religious traditions, sometimes dignity is extracted through other methods. So for instance, in some Christian theories, human dignity is extracted through the concept that human beings are created in God's form, and therefore they're dignified, and so on and so forth. In the Quranic tradition, the usual starting point for dignity is the Quran itself. In the Quran, God says, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. Verily or indeed, we have dignified the children of Adam. And karramna is to confer dignity upon somebody. The na here, this noon, is us, meaning or we, which is in reference to the royal we that God is speaking from. So we have given this dignity, bestowed this dignity upon Bani Adam, the children of Adam. And here in this verse, we have this word karam. Karramna is to give karam to somebody or bestow karam to somebody. And karam can be attained and can be inherent. As I mentioned in the beginning, we're speaking about the inherent dignity. And the question might arise then, how do we know this Quranic verse is speaking of that inherent dignity as opposed to an attained dignity, because in the Islamic tradition, there is a concept of attained honor or attained dignity. So how do we know that this verse is specifically speaking about the karam that is not attained, but rather that is inherent in every single human being? And that can be shown through the exegetical or the works of tafsir. That when we look at what the mufassirun or the exegetes are saying about this verse, they're extracting things that are equally found in all human beings. And we're going to get to that, I believe, in the next slide. And also in its legal application. So the legal application of the verse itself shows that it was equally applied to both Muslims and non-Muslims, religious people, not religious people, men, women, it doesn't matter. It was applied all across the board to the human family. And that comes because of this ending part of that portion of the verse, because that's not even the complete verse. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. Bani Adam refers to the children of Adam, and it's left as something that's broad. It's not confined to a certain religious community or to a certain type of human being. Rather, it's left open to everyone that is considered a descendant of Adam, and in the Islamic tradition, that's every single human being. Now, let's move to the exegetical understanding or discussions that pertain to this verse, right? So this question of, does it belong to all humans? Does dignity itself belong to all humans? And generally, as I mentioned, that the reasons given by the mufassirun discuss, it would be applicable to every human being. And Imam at-Tabarsi, he suggests that there are multiple reasons why dignity is attributed to all human beings. So he says, for instance, everyone fits the descriptions that the mufassirun give. And we're going to talk about those descriptions. And then he also suggests that these are worldly blessings that are given to all humans in general. So it's not limiting it to a certain amount or a certain group of people. And the second question that then follows this is, why did God grant humans these blessings? And these are all various extractions and works of tafsir usually go into why God did this or what's the reason behind it. And they try to attain this reason from the prophetic traditions or prophetic sayings. But most of these tafsir works, they also quote each other on this as well. This isn't an exhaustive list. This is just a general collection from different works of exegesis or tafsir that speak of the reasoning. So you have, for instance, Imam at-Tabari, who mentions that God created or crafted Adam personally, and this gave a personal touch to human beings. So in the Qur'an, there's a discussion between Satan and God, where God commanded Satan to bow to Adam after creating Adam. And he says, why do you refuse to bow to somebody that I created with my own hands, meaning that I created personally? So some of the mufassirun, some of the scholars of tafsir, they say this is a reason why human beings got this elevated position or this special honor. Another reason, and Tabari, for instance, mentions more than this reason here. These are just, again, selections from different works of tafsir, so we have a general idea. Some scholars mention the ability to eat with their hands as opposed to animals that consume directly through their mouths. Intellect, form, ability to comprehend, ability to reflect on life, to speak, to write, etc., so on and so forth. This is mentioned by Zamakhshari and others as well. Ibn Jawzi mentions that there are 11 opinions that are found amongst the exegetes. Imam Qurtubi mentions that some opinions are stronger than others, and he personally proposes that the intellect is the reason, and this is, in his viewpoint, the strongest reason that human beings are dignified over the other creation of God, or creations of God. The ability to make moral decisions, this is another reason that's there. And this is an interesting one because philosophically speaking, Kant also Kant also speaks of the reason why human beings are dignified, and it's connected to this concept as well. But here, Imam Shawkani mentions that the ability to make moral decisions. Imam Alusi, he gives a very beautiful proposal here. He says that all of these reasons that are mentioned prior to his time, he comes a lot later, prior to his time, all of these reasons that we find in the works of tafsir, that they're just examples, and that whoever limits it to one reason for God dignifying somebody has erred. And that is because that person has gone beyond their authority. They're not the one that decides why God gave this dignity to human beings. And he says they've contradicted at this point intellectual thinking, because there's no reason to confine it, and also reveal text. The text itself doesn't say that God has bestowed this dignity for such and such reason. All of these are extractions and understandings and ideas that people and scholars of tafsir are putting forth. Okay, now moving to the legal application. So now you have this realm of the exegetes, the scholars of tafsir that are looking into why or how human beings are dignified. What's the reason behind it? The scholars of law, the jurists, the fuqaha, they were concerned with the application and the scope of this dignity, right? So how do we actually apply this dignity? And the primary sources of Islamic law, which is the Qur'an and the Hadith tradition, or the Sunnah, they don't provide specific parameters for the use of this human dignity that's mentioned here. And because of that, the jurists by default differed on its application and also its implication. And the jurists use dignity as a legal reasoning from very early on in Islamic law. So it's not something that's new, especially post World War II, where dignity and human dignity is part of many constitutions around the world and part of many legal documents, and court systems are using it all across the globe. But this is from very early on. They're taking this verse of the Quran and then applying it to the legal tradition of Islam. And the example that I've selected here is the prohibition of transacting or using human parts. For instance, in the discussion of human hair, in the very famous work in Hanafi law, the Hidayah, in this work, when the discussion of human hair comes up, the author, Al-Marghinani, says it's not permissible to buy, sell, obtain any benefit from human hair. And he specifically quotes this verse, saying that or not quotes this verse, sorry. He explicitly states that the prohibition is due to human beings being mukarram, which is a reference to this verse. Just to put that out there, that he doesn't... to my recollection, I don't think he specifically writes out the verse, but says human beings are mukarram, dignified. So he prohibits it all across the board. And this is whether the human is a man or a woman, whether the human being is old or young, whether they're religious, not religious, whether they're Muslim, not Muslim, it doesn't matter. It's prohibited all across the board. And that's because selling, trading human parts diminishes the dignity that human beings have. They become objects of commodification, things that could be sold. And that in the Islamic tradition, at least from the jurist's understanding of this verse, or some jurist's understanding of this verse, is a way that human dignity is diminished from human beings. Now there's a hadith, a prophetic statement or tradition that prohibits hair extensions. And in this discussion of hair extensions, the various schools of Islamic law differ as to why it's prohibited. So you have, for instance, the Shafi'i school, the Hanbali school, that propose a more literal understanding that the prophetic statement says it's not permitted, therefore it's not permitted. You have the Maliki school that says that the prohibition is due to deception, that because a person is deceiving somebody else, therefore it's prohibited. The Hanafi school turns back to this point here and says that the prohibition is due to human hair being or human dignity being diminished by the use of human hair for hair extensions. Therefore, according to the Shafi'i school, the Hanbali school, all sorts of hair extensions aren't allowed, right? So the first two schools that prohibit it based on a more literal understanding, they say across the board, whether it's human hair or non-human hair, synthetic hair. The Maliki school, it's based on deception. So as long as the deception is there, whether it's human hair or non-human synthetic hair, it's still prohibited. For the Hanafis, it's only prohibited if it's human hair, because the reason behind the prohibition for the Hanafis is that that diminishing of human dignity. Now, for the final part here, I want to kind of connect it into some contemporary issues, right? One of them is organ donations and transplants. This has the same implications that we were discussing from earlier classical texts, right? The use of human hair in that instance, but here, the use of human organs. Now, scholars discuss and debate this, and there's a discussion as to whether donating your organ diminishes its dignity or not. Some scholars that have the opinion that it is perfectly fine to donate your organs, they say that in this case, it's not actually diminishing human dignity, but actually giving value to human dignity. And then you have a group of scholars that hold it impermissible due to classical rulings that say the use of human body parts is impermissible due to that dignity issue. So what I want to get at here, though, is the contemporary scholars that have moved forward with the opinion that it is permissible because it doesn't diminish the dignity, they do so in two ways. One possible theory is that, okay, let's say it does violate dignity, right? On one case, you have the violation of human life, meaning a human life is going to be at loss. On the other case, you have violation of human dignity, therefore, life is given precedence over human dignity. Another possible theory is that it doesn't violate human dignity, rather it adds to that human dignity. In any case, they distinguish between the use, right, donating the organ itself, and selling the organ. So even scholars that permit donating it, they don't permit the sale of it, because they say violating human dignity at the very least is only what is a necessity, meaning to give that person life. But you're still not allowed to sell it, because then that would violate human dignity, which isn't permissible. And then I put blood donations here because this is an interesting one. It is perfectly fine to donate blood, but you can't sell blood. And that would go to a certain extent where if you're being compensated for donating blood, sometimes blood banks, for instance, have these inviting offers for you to come and give your time. Now, some
30
scholars
seconds.
Okay, thank you. Some scholars deem that to be a compensation for the time itself. Other scholars say no, there's this perception that you're being paid for the blood, therefore you shouldn't take the gift card or whatever it may be. But all of that connects back to this concept of the use of human parts, the use of human beings, and the diminishing of their dignity. So that concludes my presentation for today. The 2 points that I want to just bring back up before I pass it over is that when we look at the work of the scholars of tafsir, the exegetes, we see that the reasons that they give for human dignity being present in human beings is general, meaning it applies to all human beings. And also when we look at the legal examples and the application of Islamic law, we also see that this human dignity that's being discussed here, coming from وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ, that verse of the Qur'an, is applicable to all human beings. Thank you so much. I hope you guys enjoyed this brief presentation.
Thank you so much. And now we'll hear from Ed Duffy.
Let's see, unmute. There we go. Are you able to see me and hear me?
Yes.
Good, thank you. The exact phrase, human dignity, does not appear in the pages of the New Testament, but I immediately was thinking of the Beatitudes when David shared the vision of our focusing tonight on that topic. By the Beatitudes, we mean 2 places in the New Testament, Matthew 5 and Luke 6. And in the version in Matthew, which we are especially going to focus on in my brief time, there are 8 sentences that begin with a word translated as blessed, hence Beatitudes. The word that Jesus uses for blessed in both of these gospel versions, however, is the same Greek word, namely makarios, which is up on the screen. And I want to show tonight something about how I picture a journey of that word makarios from classical pre-Christian Greek up into the time of the New Testament when it was used as in the Beatitudes. And as a kind of way of framing that discussion tonight, we are going to look at Matthew chapter 5, where the Beatitudes occur, and then, if time permits, also Matthew 24, and under the lens of the early Christian teacher John Chrysostom. But first, let's look at this word, which is up on the screen, makarios, M-A-C in English, or K as in the Greek, makarios. And if we could look then at the second slide, here is a copy of a painting by the Italian master Raphael, done in the year 1517, called The Council of the Gods. And the reason it's up on the screen is that one of the first uses in pre-Christian Greek for the word makar or makarios is to describe the state of the gods. They hold their habitations, and in this painting, here is the council of the gods pictured on a cloud, which presumably points to their being, after all, at Mount Olympus. And Mount Olympus is an elevation of 10,000 feet at the border of Thessaly and Macedonia. And it is a place of elevation, also of protection and of privilege. The gods, so described, are essentially untouched by the afflictions that are borne by mortals. They do not suffer from illness, privation, or death. They have their conflicts among themselves, their wars, their rivalries, but they are essentially above that cloud, untouched by death and humiliations of the mortal life. So go with me then, thirdly, please, to and we'll go actually one more, to the plural form of the word makarioi, because in, thank you, the Greek English lexicon, which is called BDAG, a definitive work that we use as we study the Greek New Testament, the word makarios, the first meaning given for this word is the privileged state of the gods in the plural. So we'll go one more slide, and here is the actual definition. And if we can make it a little bigger so people, there, thank you. The first citation from Aristotle's Ethics, where it says that for the gods, all of life is blessed or blessed. The second definition, which is the next slide, displayed, is a quotation, citation from Epicurus, the philosopher, whose name is eponymous with Epicureanism, where he says that we should think of the gods as being immortal and blessed. Now, we know that there are Hebrew precedents for the word blessed as it appears in the Bible, but tonight we're leaning particularly on the Greek sense of privilege and security of the gods, because when we look at the Beatitudes, there is on display a really shocking contrast that I think is intended, and that is that each of the 8 statements in Matthew will introduce an assertion that those who are shoved to the margins are somehow understood to be blessed or even privileged in this pre-Christian connotation of the word. The New Testament scholar N.T. Wright says one translation for blessed in Matthew 5 would be congratulations when you are afflicted, congratulations when you are persecuted. That is a counterintuitive and intentionally shocking use of the word. Some would say it's tone deaf, others would say it's revolutionary, but it's seeking in a thought-provoking way to say that divine favor operates with a different metric than worldly standards ever do, and that those experiencing hardship are better positioned to receive special forms of divine comfort than are ever going to be accessible to those who are privileged in a worldly sense. I don't think that the Beatitudes in Matthew or Luke's version are glorifying suffering, but they are, I think, very much offering divine presence within it and an inherent sense, therefore, of dignity. To help us, though, to get closer to some of those claims, I want to go to a 4th century exegete, and we'll move a slide forward and we can make it smaller again. And if we make it a little smaller again, there is the likeness of St. John Chrysostom that is still visible at Hagia Sophia, the mosque in Istanbul, which I did visit last summer. And you're in there, you can see this is actually the first earliest preserved likeness of St. John Chrysostom. So who was he? He was Archbishop at Constantinople. He was a prolific writer, teacher, preacher. His epithet was Chrysostom, meaning golden-mouthed, because that was the tribute of people who experienced him as the brilliant orator and wordsmith that he was. I would put on the table the disclaimer that Chrysostom does have a complex legacy. In particular, one of his works, Adversus Judaios, against Jews, reflects that complicated Jewish-Christian tension of his time, and his stern words have been too easily susceptible to the co-opting that they have been given by people intent on anti-Semitism. But thankfully, today we're looking at a work of his that is far better for interfaith dialogue. And what we're looking at is homily 15 in Chrysostom, in which he considers the Beatitudes. And what he says, first of all, in a very Greek way, is that Jesus did not begin with statutes and commandments, but rather began with Beatitudes. He is setting forth, he says, a high and exalted form of ethics, but begins with humility. And one is reminded as he talks in that way, I was reminded of Socrates saying that the quest for wisdom is, first of all, to acknowledge that we have none, and that the degree to which I am wise is the degree to which I acknowledge that I am not. And so in a very similar way, Makarios is a kind of blessedness that is not only walking rightly with God, but that the way to discover and claim blessedness is to confess our lack of it, our poverty of spirit. So that's the very first thing in his commentary on this that Chrysostom wants to say. And as such, he wants to say that it is that blessedness is accessible to absolutely everybody, because after all, everybody can go to, if they choose, go to a place of humility. But this is, again, counterintuitive, and the turning upside down of worldly values is the main thing that Chrysostom is after. He says the meek and humble person is, first of all, one who is standing upon the rock that is unshakable. The turning upside down of worldly values is the restoration of the original value of things. Costly things in this world are seen as being of less value, and inexpensive things in the estimation of this world are seen to be precious. So think for a moment of that council of the gods. They are makarios in the eyes of the world. They are privileged. But the redemptive work of Christ for Chrysostom is to reveal and restore the beauty of blessedness to those who are considered in this world to be of no account. So lastly, if we go to Matthew 24, the word makarios reappears in the gospel account of Saint Matthew. And this time, I think, as a kind of frame poised against chapter 5. In 24, verse 45, the question is asked, who is the faithful and wise servant whom the master has set over the household? And the answer given in the next verse is, blessed is that one whom the master, when he comes, will find giving them food at the proper time. The one who is truly blessed is not only the one who is humble and poor in spirit, it is also the one who is acting on these principles by sharing food with those around us who are hungry. Chrysostom says that the gospel does not claim that I was sick and you healed me. Rather, it says, I was sick and you visited me. It does not say I was in prison and you freed me. It said I was in prison and you visited me. In other words, I don't think he's watering down our need to address systemic oppression, but I think he is saying that all persons, rich and poor, he's very big on this, all of us, rich and poor, are accountable to show mercy at whatever level we are able. Elaborate charity systems can unwittingly preserve imbalances of power. And when we give bread, our bread, to the hungry person, we are giving ourselves to that person just as surely as Jesus made himself one with the person whom society has made to be of no account. The self-emptying of Jesus, the kenosis, the coming down in human incarnate form, the surrendering of godly perks is a showing of the blessing that is found and accessible to us in this world as we respond to those who have been demeaned in the eyes of the world by others. So I'm going to actually stop there and allow there to be all the more time for questions later. But it's been very exciting to be able to share some of this beautiful kind of material that I think John Chrysostom makes available to us in his commentaries.
Thank you so much. And now we shall hear from Dickie Sofjan.
Hello, good morning, good evening. I hope everyone can see my presentation right now.
Yes, we can see it.
Thank you very much. So I just returned from Oxford and London yesterday, so I think I've got hay fever right now, so hence my voice is somewhat different from my normal one. But basically, I'd like to talk about how Indonesians look at the concept of human dignity and how they applied that in their sort of construction of the Pancasila state ideology, as well as what we would call civil religion in Indonesia, and how that played out in especially the post-Second World War, and how that sort of permeated into the contemporary period right now in terms of how we understand human dignity in the contemporary context. So just a little bit about myself, but basically since December 2018, we've been involved in what's called the Punta del Este Human Dignity for Everyone Everywhere project. And this is together with a number of scholars and parliamentarians, politicians, activists in trying to push forward on this idea that human dignity is for everyone and everywhere. And ever since, we've held international workshops in Oxford, in more precisely Christchurch. And this was just one of the events that we held in 2023, I believe, on the foundations and founding figures of UDHR. And of course, this was within the context of the 75th anniversary of the UDHR. So we do have a special edition on this work that we did, which was precisely published on the 10th of December 2023. So it was on the day of the anniversary of the UDHR. So as we know that these are the founding figures of the UDHR, of course, Eleanor Roosevelt was very much involved in the leadership of the drafting and the sort of concoction of the idea and having it streamlined to sort of include and incorporate many of the different philosophies and different ideas regarding what human dignity is and is not. But as you can see, it's mostly by men, and mostly a lot of them are Western, although we do have Charles Habib Malik from Lebanon, and we have P.C. Chang from China, and then also Alexander Bogomolov and others, yeah. But then you would see some of the sort of symptomatic sort of biases and inherent ideas that flow along in the idea of human dignity in the UDHR. But obviously, human rights within the context of UDHR is essentialized to mean human dignity, in the sense that human dignity is the essence of human rights. And of course, one of the contributions, for instance, from the Indian delegation, which was headed by a woman at that time, was to reconstruct the idea that all men are equal, but instead have changed the term man into human beings. So all human beings are created equal. And so these are just some of the sort of intricacies and the sort of nuance ideas and discourses taking place. So what I did, and I'd like to share the work that I did, was to look at the contending discourses on human rights and dignity in the post-Second World War, and to specifically offer a sort of non-factual analysis, or counterfactual analysis of how the discourse on specifically human dignity was brought out within the context of UDHR, and also within the more global in general discussion and deliberation about human rights and human dignity. And so what I did was to bring out the work of Sukarno. And as you know, that Sukarno is one of the leaders of the non-aligned movement. And of course, he was vehemently anti-colonial. Here's, of course, somebody who was known to be multilingual. He was very fluent in 7 languages, and he writes many of his sort of manifestos and articles. But 2 of his main works are quite important. Yeah, I mean, this is just one of them, which is a 2-volume work on his writing when he was between the ages of 25 years old and 40, which talks about the sort of Indonesian revolution. And altogether it has 1,100 pages. So if you look at the things he had written on human dignity and human rights, I thought that this was really interesting to look at, especially in terms of his sort of counter discourse on the idea of human dignity. Yeah, one of the things that he mentioned constantly, and this goes beyond his writings, yeah, but also some of his speeches at the UN, which became quite well known, which is to build the world anew, talks about this hypocrisy, yeah, hypocrisy of the West, basically. Which came down hard on the world to sort of make this universal declaration on human rights and this idea about human dignity. One of the sort of criticisms he said was that why is it that you insist on human rights and human dignity, yet you do not support the decolonization process, that you still remain to be embracing imperialism and colonialism. And so this has been one of his sort of main thrusts of his whole argument about dignity, about rights. According to Sukarno, if you look at his works and his speeches, he talks much more of dignity, not in terms of the individual, but in terms of the nation and the community. So he was talking more specifically, especially in his book, Di Bawah Bendera Revolusi, here, Under the Banner of the Revolution, that he talks about national dignity. He talks about community dignities. And of course, this brings out this idea whether dignity, whether human dignity or human rights for that matter, should be sort of centered in the idea of the individual, or whether it could also be understood and operationalized beyond the individual to mean the collective or the community or the nation. So I thought this was one of the major contributions of the Indonesians in terms of their idea of human rights and human dignity. And of course, we saw a number of the Western states being then against Sukarno and the non-aligned movement, because for them, the sort of neutrality that the non-aligned movement leaders, for instance, and here we could see a number of them. We can see Jawaharlal Nehru, we can from India, we can see Nkrumah from Ghana, we can see Nasser from Egypt, Sukarno from Indonesia, and Tito from Yugoslavia. But basically, Sukarno and most of the non-aligned movement leaders saw that there was that imposition made, that the human rights and human dignity based on the individual was, for the most part, a Western construction, and that they saw, obviously, sovereignty is a central political idea that needs to be secured for the dignity and rights of the communities and the nations that want to be free from the shackles of colonialism and imperialism. There's also this conception that the idea of human dignity based on the individual has its secular bias. As we know that, and as we saw from the previous presentations, that human dignity is something that is endowed by God, something that is given to the human family, to Bani Adam, to the children of Adam. And so there is this stark difference in terms of looking at human dignity from both the secular as well as from the religious perspective. Then also there's this cultural relativism that I also discussed in my paper in terms of looking at why there is this dichotomous understanding between the Western and the non-Western ideas about rights and dignity. The last argument that I posed was this idea about hypocrisy. And again, there's a lot of talk about rights, there's a lot of talk about dignity at the individual level, but when it comes to the nation, when it comes to communities, there seemed to be this pushback toward the idea that nations could also have dignity. Yeah. That we should mainly focus on the individual based dignity and rights, but not the national dignity and rights. So in Bahasa Indonesia, we have two words for the term dignity. And one is harkat and the other one is martabat. Sometimes we use them interchangeably. Sometimes we use them in couples. So we could say harkat dan martabat kemanusiaan, which basically means human dignity in Indonesia. But while harkat can be if you look at the big dictionary of Bahasa Indonesia, you would see that there's a difference between harkat and martabat. Harkat basically looks at the quality of an individual or group of people and their sort of hierarchy or level of value. And this is something which is achievable, something that can be attained, something that you can work hard for, and therefore this is something which is more objective. While martabat is something which is more subjective in the sense that this is something which is endowed, something which is bestowed, something given, a value, a moral system, ethics, that is already there for all human beings, regardless of others. And of course, we could also apply this beyond the sort of anthropocentric view of human dignity and rights and go beyond it to include the human species, the animal species, the trees, plants, and also the environment and ecologies. Now, the last part I'd like to say is about this Pancasila, which anyone who's familiar with the Indian subcontinent, for instance, would know that Pancasila is derived from the idea of the 5 principles. Yeah, and if you look at each and every one of these 5 principles that is incorporated into Pancasila, you would know that many of them, or if not all of them, have in it inherently the idea of rights and dignity. But of course, to many scholars and observers, they would find that some of the principles might also be problematic in many different ways. So I'm not going to discuss all 5 principles, but I'll just talk mainly about the first one, which is Ketuhanan yang Maha Esa. In a lot of the translations and discussions about Pancasila, there is this tendency to sort of simplify the idea of Ketuhanan yang Maha Esa to say believe or belief in the one and only God. But if you look at the linguistic aspect of this principle, it seems that it is something that is far removed from the actual word. I mean, the word used is ketuhanan, not Tuhan. Tuhan means God in Bahasa Indonesia, and the word used here is ketuhanan. Yeah, and what it means is that from the purely linguistic viewpoint, one might say that this is belief in one God, but in another interpretation, one might say that this is not belief in God, but that it translates into the unity of divinity. So, of course, if any of you are familiar with the Indonesian language, culture, and religion, there is a lot of the sort of Indic influences in the way we use language. Yeah, even the term "esa," for instance, yeah, which means one.
You've got about 20 seconds.
Yes.
Yeah.
So again, this translates into many problems and issues regarding the sort of social hermeneutics of things. Yeah, I can say a lot about how Pancasila is problematized nowadays, but I'd just like to share with you some of the reflections. One is that human dignity, to me, remains an elusive concept, and I think there still needs to be much work to be done in terms of the social hermeneutics of how the concept could be applied both socially, politically, and internationally as well. And I think it has a lot to do also with how dignity and rights are perceived and studied under post-colonial perspectives. And I think there needs to be a lot more work and reflections to be done. So thank you very much. Shukran.
Thank you so much. That was quite interesting. And now our last speaker is Anthem Jason.
Okay. Can you hear my voice clearly?
Yes, you could be a little bit louder, but yes, it's very clear.
Okay, thank you.
Good.
I want to use the microphone because I believe this is a distraction. So, thank you for the before presenter, especially Pak Diki as my promoter in ICRS. So, he put a very solid foundation to my presentation. So, okay, let me see. Okay. So today, thank you for having me in this presentation. And as Pak Diki said about Indonesia, I will go to the next slide. And okay. Maybe I will start from this. So this Indonesia, yeah, Pak Diki and his presentation about how Indonesia is very, actually it is very ideal situation for me to reflect on human dignity. When we see Indonesia, Indonesia is a maritime country dotted with gems and in forms of islands and numbering more than 17,000 islands with various ethnicities, language, tribes, and customs. So with all these differences, we could see that the real wealth of Indonesia is not a gold, it's not nickel or palm oil, but it's abundant natural resources. But the real wealth of Indonesia is local cultures that can respect each other, respect nature, and see differences as it is something to complement each other's weakness and shortcomings, and not as dividing wall. So in Indonesia, Pak Diki also, Mr. Diki also already explained about the first Pancasila principles, belief in the one and only God. And actually, in Indonesia situation, it can be problematic for the freedom of religion and belief. And I want to share the situation in Indonesia, but actually there is a context that Indonesia has a very various ethnicity and religion and belief, and we are now struggling, and we are now on the process to be more and more freedom on religion and belief. And actually Indonesia Pancasila, there is also Bhinneka Tunggal Ika. Bhinneka Tunggal Ika actually coming from the Javanese ancient scripture, and it is actually coming from Buddhist scripture. And the Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, the complete sentence is Bhinneka Tunggal Ika Tanhana Dharma Mangrawa. It is meant that it is said that Buddha and Siva are two different substances. They are indeed different, but how can they be recognized? Because the truth of Buddha and Siva is one. Divided it is but one too. So there is no confusion in the truth. So to put situation in Buddhism in Indonesia, Buddhism in Indonesia undergone many significant transformation shaped by cultural and political dynamics. So this is I put some of the scholars like Brown, Chia, and Yulianti. They are doing research on Buddhism in Indonesia, and the challenge of Buddhism faces in Indonesia, like they have to adapt the first principles, like Mr. Dickey said about the first principle that we should believe in God, and maybe all of you know that about Buddhism has now a clear definition, or maybe it is different with different definition about God in Buddhism. So this is one of the challenge, and the other challenge that maybe Buddhism have the stigma of Chinese religion, and it is like the minority, so it become a double minority, ethnicity and religiosity. So the other challenge like urbanization and commercialization, like as you know that Buddhist temple and Buddhist statue now become a like cultural site, but it's become a tourism site. So it is like commodification for tourism on the religious side on Buddhism. So there is many challenges, and there is many I would say that is not perfect. So but it is a real, but I believe that it is a ideal situation for me to reflect on human dignity in Indonesia. For this presentation, I will like to tell you about one story in Buddhism, that is Jataka, Losaka Jataka. So the story of Losaka Jataka, yeah, you can easily search on the internet and you also view on YouTube. So I will also share short about the story. So Losaka Jataka, it is coming from the Jataka genre. So Jataka genre is one of the scripture on a Buddhist, especially it is recognized in many Buddhist scripture, and you can see that Jataka genre consists of 550 texts in the Theravada canon. So it is also recognized in the Mahayana canon. Yeah, it is in Jataka in the Chinese version, and I would like to share you about the story in Losaka Jataka. So Losaka Jataka tell about a child being born in a fisherman family. So this fisherman family village with a small population, about 1,000 people, and the village has no name in the story, but it is in the kingdom of Kosala. Misfortune or bad luck is happening since Losaka in her mother's womb. So in the first time Losaka has not been born, but it is also misfortune or bad luck coming to the village. So Losaka was born during these tough times, and his family and village, when his mother was pregnant, the fishermen having bad luck catching fish, and the village went through 7 fires, and tax collectors 7 show up. So the troubles keep coming and coming to the village. So his birth happened in this middle of this hardship. The villagers were sure that all this misfortune was because someone was a breeder of misfortune, or someone who started suffering the result of this karma. So they started dividing themselves among groups until they traced Losaka family. Those associated with Losaka had their life improved, but the ones associated with Losaka were experienced misfortune. So the villagers conclude that Losaka family bring misfortune to them. So, and Losaka mother had finally given birth to the small child, and she took care of him until he was able to run and walk around. And with the time, she gave him a postcard and left him. So Losaka being left, and as a small child at the age of 7, I think, and he became a beggar. So misfortune and being unloved and being abandoned for Losaka. And when he come to the capital, he met with Sariputra. So when Losaka reached the age of 7, he's found by Sariputra while going for alms in Sarasvati, the capital kingdom of Kosala. So in this story, Sariputra take a role as Bodhisattva. So he take Losaka and bring him to the ordain. So Sariputra then takes Losaka in the Sangha, teaching him, providing care and everything necessary for his development. So it can be perceived that in this tale, Sariputra role is one of the Bodhisattva, as I've mentioned before. So and Losaka in the Sangha. Sangha means a Buddhist community, and in the Buddha's era. And now Sangha also one of the gem in Buddhist. So in Buddhist tradition, we have 3 gems, Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Buddha as the guru who teach the truth, and Dhamma is the truth that Buddha teach, and the Sangha or the bhikkhu or the bhikkhu community. So Sariputra take Losaka in the Sangha and providing care, and Losaka then becoming a monk and training tirelessly. So Losaka, however, even though he was already becoming a monk, Losaka still receives less alms and less. This is being result because of his previous deeds, as the story tells, but he was protected, care, and had access to learning and practicing the Dharma. So this is what is the most important for him. So however, maybe I want to emphasize that the karma concept in Buddhist is a little bit different with Vedic system. So in Vedic system, the karma, maybe it's like inevitable fate. So, but in Buddhist, the karma play and still plays an important role in determining our fate, but it is we can change it by doing a good deeds. So in short, back to the story about Losaka, all the effort from the Sangha, especially from the Buddha and support from the Sariputra, Losaka was able to complete his studies. And at the end, Losaka can become Arhat. Arhat is someone free from the state of affliction, who will not reborn again and entering Nirvana Dhatu after the death. So the story explains in the beginning that this will be Losaka final life in the realm of uncontrollable birth. So in the Jataka, actually, this is only one part of the story. And the Jataka also explain why Losaka have like this misfortune in his life. And this is the story of the karma, but I will not talking about the cause or the cause of the Losaka misfortune. But what I want to talk about from the Losaka Jataka here is situating here this story in Buddhism, or maybe in the larger context in Indonesia. So the story, from the story, actually, what I want to emphasize is that the sentient beings and human dignity, and what we see that in Indonesia, the situation in Indonesia is not ideal, yeah, and so this topic, we see that human beings and sentient beings in Indonesia, we see that the situation, the economic, the political, and the freedom of religion belief is not ideal. But I think it is also the same from the other part of the world. So from the story of Losaka, what we see that we are now in Losaka role, or we are in the Sariputra role. We are now in the bottom of our life. We are in the poor situation. We cannot do everything. But in the Losaka story, yeah, actually the beauty of human dignity lies in the how we realize the Buddha nature in our life. So maybe we will see that in this part, that Buddha nature is the capacity for every beings. Yeah, Buddha nature in ourselves. Yeah, is, even though we are our life in the below, but we do not commit despicable and shameful action. But in other hand, when our lives at the top, we have power, ability, or wealth, we do not deny the Buddha nature within us, but we use all these external conditions as a means to realize kindness for others, to realize our inner Buddha nature. So that is how we live a dignified life. Actually, this part is actually related to the Mr. Dicky concept about harkat and martabat. So what we look at the harkat and martabat in human dignity in Indonesia, and reflect on our life as a human. Yeah, sometimes we are on the below, and sometimes we are on the top. So human dignity is not about who we are, what we have, but what we're doing, and in whatever situation, what we realize in human dignity.
Yeah, about a minute.
Okay, just to conclude that living as a Buddhist in Indonesia is not easy. Yeah, many full challenges and difficulties, but I believe that human dignity is a relational condition. Yeah, where our human dignity is only realized when we can respect the dignity of life of others, and other than that, respect the dignity of living entities. Human dignity only has meaning if it exists within the web of life to which all entities are connected. So this respect for human dignity is respect for all life. So in Indonesian situation, and the second principle of Pancasila, just and civilized humanity, it is a concept rooted in principles of equality, respect, and fairness. And on Buddha nature, the concept from Buddhists, it refers to the inherent potential in all beings to achieve enlightenment. So it is a non-dualistic concept that sees human nature as interconnected with all others beings. And actually, I still have chance to explain in the. Also, it's actually related to the Bruno Latour concept about we have never been modern and other ecological terms. But I hope you can read it. We can discuss it in another occasion. So the actually modern human, it is refers to the perspective that our human-centric is interconnected and with compassion and justice. So the other is that these three concepts encourage us a holistic approach to understanding human existence and human dignity. And okay, thank you. That's my presentation.
Thank you so much. I find that we've been given 4 wonderful examples of how to engage the topic of human dignity through examination of sacred texts and doctrinal concepts and legal reasoning. It's been very interesting. If we could have all 4 speakers on screen now, Joe. There we go. Got waiting for 2 more. Are they there? Yeah. Okay, so my question to all 4 of you is this: what questions might you have for each other? There's time for each of you to ask a question of one of your co-panelists. So do any of you have a question for one of your co-panelists? Or a comment? Yeah, Dickie.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lucinda. And I'd like to appreciate all of the presentations. And I just like to ask a very basic question, which is sort of looming over my head constantly. And this is the idea of the duality of understanding about how we come to terms with human dignity. So is human dignity something that is bestowed, something that is inherent, or something that is achievable and could only be done through dharma, through good action, benevolent acts? And how do we, as I presented, how do we look at the duality between human dignity and rights, and whether they merely apply to the individual or the collective? I'd really like to know the perspective from the other presenters, especially from the different religious perspectives. Thank you very much.
That's a wonderful question. I'm wondering, Ed Duffy, are you able to say something to that question?
Yes. So as I mull that very thoughtful question, it seems to me that in Christian and Jewish continuity of understandings, as I understand them, the sense of dignity is part and parcel of our being created in the image of God. Imam Rashid, I think, was correct in putting his finger on it in that way in his observation of Christianity from a cross-cultural perspective in his presentation. There is a sense in which, in mine, I got the idea that Chrysostom is lifting the veil on the fact that that dignity has been obscured by worldly rejection of God's original design, and somehow needs to be restored or revealed once again. And that the self-emptying of Christ in the Christian picture is a way in which Christ is going to make radical identification with people who are marginalized, and thereby show that when you give water to them, you are giving it actually to God or to Jesus themselves. And the continuity that I felt with Anton in your presentation at the end, when you gave the narrative of and forgive me, I'm forgetting the name that began with L in the narrative, disguised as a beggar. This is a theme that actually plays out in the Matthew Beatitudes and in Matthew 25, namely that inasmuch as you gave water to the person who was thirsty, you gave it also to me. This is a persistent theme in ancient Greek culture. Odysseus, going back to Ithaca, is disguised. It's in Judaism when the Lord appears with 2 angels at the tent at Mamre, and I believe it's also to be found in Qur'an, but perhaps it's beautifully expressed by you in the Buddhist narrative.
Thank you. I was interested in the number of intersections that came up between human dignity and freedom of religion and belief, human dignity and justice, justice and rights. Those concepts are playing with each other. Did any of you have something more to say about any of those intersections that you'd like another minute? If so, this is your time. I'm looking, Arqum for sure might have something to say.
Sure, I can add something there. Well, I see Jason has his hand up. I don't know if he wanted to specifically add something, he can, but
How about if you both do? Maybe you take a minute and he'll take a minute.
sure. I guess one of the things that I'll say is, or something more so for thought, is that a lot of these discussions, there's also a simultaneous discussion that needs to be had, which is there's effectively two types of readings of dignity that we have, and they're based on the communal society versus individualistic society narratives. And depending on how we read human dignity, with those types of viewpoints, will differ our understanding of human dignity. To give you an example, in the case of Germany, the Constitution of Germany grants human dignity to all people, and it sees it as something that's inherent. And currently, they're having this issue of whether allowing abortions is going to infringe upon the dignity of that unborn human being, and whether prohibiting the abortion will then infringe the dignity of that woman that can no longer make that choice. So that contradiction takes place, possibly violating dignity in two different scenarios, but because of two possible readings of dignity as well. And that's I guess it's an interesting intersection to think about there.
Yeah, thank you. Anton, what were you going to say?
Okay, thank you very much. And I would like to comment about Mr. Dickey's question about whether the human dignity as inherently we have as a human, but coming to the explanation, maybe I would say that I will claim disclaimer that I'm not speaking on the behalf of Buddhism. As you know, that Buddhism is very varied, and there is a many variation in the explanation. And actually, the Buddha nature that I explained before is only belong to the Mahayana Buddhism, and Mahayana Buddhism also have a big variety. So I would say that what I speak in this seminar is my personal reflection on what I read and what I understand on the Buddhist concept about human dignity. So yeah, every religion has a variety, and I believe that in Indonesia we are practicing this as a freedom of religion and belief, and I'm taught in the university about freedom and religion and belief, and I believe this is one of the human dignity that I obtained from my college, my professor, and my friends in the university. And as mentioned by Rashid about that we read human dignity in the two courses, that human dignity is something bestowed, something given from others, or something given from God. It is inherently in human. And this, I believe, from my personal reading from the Buddhist concept, the Buddha nature is inherently, it is something we have before we born. So this is we have it in before. But the other things is that human dignity is also something we realize in ourselves, in our life. So how we dignify our life. This is also one of the part of the human dignity. So other than we have it before, but we also should to dignify, make our life dignified. How? By respecting other human dignity and respecting the dignity of the other entities, not only human. Okay,
Thank you. Thank you. I wonder if there is a question from our viewers. I don't see one in the chat, but if someone has a question, we have time for one well-phrased question. If not,
I have a question.
okay.
So it seems like everyone is in favor of human dignity. It seems like a good thing, and everybody's in agreement from different perspectives that this is a positive thing. But as we've seen, it's can be complicated, and where it comes from, who has it, how it's infleshed in particular societies becomes complicated. So I'm really interested in this individual versus communal conversation, specifically as it came out in Arqum's discussion about the difference between the donor. Like, is it impinging on the dignity of the one who's losing the organ or the one who's gaining the organ? And we could expand this into a conversation about not only human dignity, but dignity of the environment, as Dickie mentioned earlier. You know, how do we expand this concern to also other living things or the ecology? So let me just leave it there.
Thank you. That ties in with maybe my last comment, as I am mindful of the clock here, which is that Anton Jason raised the notion of the need to read between the lines of scripture. And as a symposium on sacred texts, I wonder what degree of reading between the lines do the rest of you feel the need to engage in? Is that something that you find necessary?
A quick observation that I thought was borne out by my reading, but then also by listening to my colleagues, and that is that dignity is not only a concept, but a moral imperative, a practical and moral imperative.
Would each of you like to have a last word, like one last thought you'd like to share with us before I turn it over to Dr. Grafton to close? Dickie, do you have a last word for us?
I think the more you talk about human dignity, the more questions you get, right? And the more confusing you get. And the more you listen to, scholars and experts from different religious traditions, then it becomes much more mind-boggling because there's so many things to unpack in terms of how we understand, how we approach, and how we study human dignity. And I think such conversations that we've been having today, I think, is an important one. And I think hopefully we will be able to at least come to terms in terms of how we decide on the scope of human dignity. I mean, is human dignity is the be all and all of things, or do we go beyond the human species and think also about the other species and the ecologies? I mean, we know that in other discourses that in the environment now has acquired personhood, right? A status of personhood in positive laws, for instance. So I see a lot of potential developments, but I think there's also a lot of moral philosophy work that needs to be done in the near future. Thank you.
That might be a really good place to leave it, unless if one of my panelists wants to say one more thing, let me know now. But I think Dickie has summarized it pretty well for us, and I'm seeing some nods. So I think at this point, Dr. Grafton, it's back to you to wrap this up. I've very much enjoyed being your moderator.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Mosher. I want to thank the speakers for this session, Dickie and Ed and Athen and Arqum, for your work, your preparation for this and raising some important questions. I want to thank Dr. Mosher for moderating and keeping us on time and for the questions. Of course, want to also thank all the attendees who came. Thank you for your time and participation with us. And last but not least, I want to give a big shout out to Joe Chung, who is our Hartford International staff person lurking behind the shadows here, who made all of this possible. So thank you, Joe. This webinar will be up on the McDonald Center website as soon as it's curated. So we look forward to having you join and take a look at that again, and for further conversations with these fine scholars. Thank you so much and have a good day.
Thank you, David. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.